in the world of personal injury, we are dealing with people who are going through the darkest moments of their life. Sending an AI bot at them and being like, talk to this person instead of a human, that could be bad.
That's Ray Mieszaniec, co-founder of EvenUp.
But if you set expectations correctly, and if you can make sure that the proper framing and expectations are set there, we are seeing folks are interacting with AI agents as if they're real people.
I'm Michael Mogill, founder and CEO of Crisp, the nation's #1 law firm growth company. I've built my business through practice, not theory. Crisp started with just $500 to my name and has grown to over 8 figures in revenue over the last few years, earning a spot on the Inc. 500 list of the fastest growing private companies in America. Our approach has been to take everything we've learned about generating massive growth within our own organization and help the country's most ambitious and committed law firm owners do the same for theirs. In each episode of this podcast, I sit down with innovative market leaders from the legal industry and beyond to learn from those who thrive in the face of adversity, challenge the status quo, and define what it means to be a true game changer. I sat down with Ray Mieszaniec to discuss why the most profitable firms are often the most efficient, how automation can unlock your team's bandwidth and improve client satisfaction, and how embracing AI today keeps your firm relevant tomorrow.
4.5 years ago, I remember doing my first cold calls to lawyers. They're like, AI? Tell me, how is AI going to help me run my law firm? And then now today, you talk to those very same lawyers and they're like, AI is going to run my entire law firm. It's pretty crazy how much has changed over the past 4.5 years.
That's coming up on the Game Changing Attorney podcast. Before we begin today's episode, I want to remind you that we aren't beholden to any sponsors or run any ads on this podcast. This allows us to present all of our episodes raw and unfiltered. I'm not going to push any made-to-order meal services on you or try to save you any money on your car insurance. That being said, I have one small request. If you receive any value from this podcast, please give it a 5-star review. Pay the fee so we can keep this podcast free. Ray, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael, having me in your office, having me in this podcast room. It's beautiful.
Thank you, man. I appreciate you making the trip. Where are you coming from right now?
So I was actually coming from Canada because I went and visited my mom. And I've been on the road for the past 2 weeks, so I have not been home yet.
I mean, every time we've chatted, you are somewhere, like you're traveling somewhere. You must have built up like extreme travel endurance. That's how much, in a given month, how much are you on the road?
Oh, in a given month? I can tell you probably in a given month how much I'm not on the road, and that's about like 4 days a month. Yeah, so I've racked up a lot of points and status, but it's all been worth it, honestly. So I have no complaints.
Yeah, man. And so for those that are tuning in that may not be familiar with you and kind of EvenUp, I'm always curious why people are the way they are, right? It's usually something to do with like our childhood or our upbringing. What is really like your origin story? Kind of what's defined your mission, your purpose? How would you describe that?
Oof, there's a lot. I would say just what has defined me or created me is honestly just like the nurturing of my parents, for sure. I learned a lot from just kind of like observing my parents, my mom and dad. Honestly, the best people I could have learned from, like in terms of what to do and also what not to do in many cases too, because I paved my own path in certain ways. But what started EvenUp before it was even an idea was 20 years ago, my dad was in a catastrophic motor vehicle accident. So he woke up one morning, cooked us all breakfast at 4 a.m. 5 a.m. he was out the door as usual. And then across town, there was a couple having a fight. And so this man shot his girlfriend in the chest and went on a high-speed police chase. And what concluded that chase was essentially my dad's car being split in half at the intersection that he crossed every single day. That's actually right at the corner of my house. And so ultimately, what happened from there is my parents, as many lawyers listening probably have seen in their cases, but my parents fought for 3 years just to get a fair settlement against the insurance carriers. And ultimately what happened was my mom, working 3 jobs, multiple jobs at a time, was, basically crumbling. And my parents together were crumbling under immense financial pressure. And so what did my dad do? He wanted to do what any good man would do for his wife, is just try to stop that suffering. And so he took what money was on the table, and that money was more than any two immigrants have ever seen at one moment in their life anyway. So they thought it was a lot of money. They ended up walking away with $200,000 for a family of 5 for the rest of their lives, thinking everything was going to be okay. And then, long story short, we learned that it wasn't a lot of money after, you got to pay off your bills and everything. And so never will I say that that was the moment that I started shaking my fist and saying, like, I'm going to seek vengeance one day against insurance carriers or anything like that.
There wasn't like the villain origin story?
There was no like origin story there. It was just from a young age, all that happened was my parents were like, hey, we're kind of strapped for cash, so you and your sister have to help out. And so from a very young age, just doing all sorts of things to make money. So like, taking as many paper routes as I could, which was funny. When I was hanging with my mom, we did a walk around my paper route, and I was just seeing like the neighborhood, and I'm just like, man, it's crazy like how much work it takes to do a delivery route. And I had like 3, the max that I was allowed to have. And but yeah, doing odd jobs, selling flowers. I used to buy bedding plants from farms in the outskirts and then bring them back into the city and sell them, but teaching people how to actually plant. And somewhere in this serendipitous kind of journey of life and that nurturing of my parents have always been very entrepreneurial, obviously teaching me how to use my 2 hands and my brain and be as resourceful as possible. That led me down the entrepreneurial path to which I eventually gravitated towards tech. And so when I was living and working in Hong Kong, I worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers as a cybersecurity and anti-money laundering consultant. And then that didn't, work out for me. That's not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And there's certain reasons behind that. It didn't match my values. And then I ultimately, started my first company with a friend in Hong Kong. And long story short, that's what brought us to San Francisco. Met lots of people in San Francisco, and EvenUp is our second company now that I've started with 2 other co-founders that were first friends that I met in my first days in San Francisco.
Yeah. It's amazing. I mean, thinking back even just across your story, like for the insurance company and what they, essentially did to your family, in many respects was the villain origin story, because it led to you founding and building a unicorn $1 billion company that quite literally levels the playing field or up levels the playing field for personal injury firms. How would you describe EvenUp?
Yeah, no, that's actually, it's a crazy, truly full circle moment, right? Because when I was sitting in the park with my co-founders, and my co-founder, former litigator, defense lawyer, representing the insurance carriers, we were just talking in the park in terms of how do you value personal injury cases and all that stuff. And he's like, yeah, if you have, injuries, treatments, jurisdiction, who you're going up against, the settlement data, you can get pretty good at estimating what a case will settle for, or what a case is worth. And so I was like, where does the data live? And he was like, well, on the insurance carrier side, there's all these different systems, Colossus, Claims IQ, all of that. And he's like, yeah, they have access to all this. And I'm like, well, what do the good guys have? And he was like, nothing. It's all fragmented. And so when I was having that conversation, I was like, we should build it. We should build it. And so EvenUp was very much inspired to be the company to level the playing field, to maximize the value of every claim. And so in the very early days, what started out, we, if folks know what we looked like 4.5 years ago, we were just drafting demands because we thought, the pen is mightier than the sword. And we thought through the demand package, we can argue for like using the facts, using all of the computations, the verdicts, et cetera. We could come up with like robust damage calculations to basically argue for, this is what my case is worth. And this is why you should pay me this. Tell me why you wouldn't pay this number, or basically put the onus on the other side as to why they wouldn't pay this number. And that has very much evolved into something that's much bigger now. So EvenUp today, we're not just demands. We power, like basically we provide AI powered solutions from intake all the way to resolution. Because what we learned during the course of drafting demands is that basically through our AI powered demands, we were helping lawyers basically settle for policy limits 69% more likely when they were using our demands. But my team always likes to think of like, okay, well, what about the cases that are not? What's happening there? And we started looking into what was causing these claims to not settle for the policy limits or the maximum amounts that we saw that they could be. And we started seeing all sorts of problems. Like in every 10 cases, there's 5 missing bills and records, right? Which translates to money being left on the table. Or we saw 17% of cases have a treatment gap of over 30 days. And we're like, that's really bad. How can we mitigate that? So we started seeing all of these little inefficiencies that were like, we can't possibly call ourselves EvenUp if we don't get involved earlier on in the case life cycle to influence how this case is managed or make sure that the case is managed effectively from day one. Because you can draft an awesome demand, but the case is basically made from intake all the way to when the demand is written. And so now, EvenUp has become the leader in AI development for personal injury workflows and document generation. Proud to be trailblazing there and doing our absolute best to solve as many problems as possible for PI firms.
I love it, man. It seems like the mission is really grown, and the scope of what EvenUp does has definitely scaled. Like, what are some of the headwinds that law firm owners are facing that EvenUp is aiming to address?
Yeah, I talked about those inefficiencies that exist, right? Like the treatment gaps and those missing bills and records, all this stuff. These are all inefficiencies that exist today, but firms have been able to thrive and build great practices, profitable practices, even though those inefficiencies exist. Now, in terms of headwinds, though, I do believe that there are headwinds that are going to make it harder to run a profitable practice or grow your practice in the way that you'd like to, given those inefficiencies. And so, for example, like the headwinds that we're seeing, like, for example, the rise of autonomous vehicles, right? With autonomous vehicles over time, and I'm not trying to say the sky is falling, but over time, autonomous vehicles, there will be more and more, and we see more and more on the streets. I think Waymo, you have some in Atlanta now, right?
Yep.
So more and more autonomous vehicles on the street, meaning there's going to be potentially less motor vehicle accidents, which is a big part of a lot of PI lawyers' practices. And so with less cases, well, what do you need to do if you're worried about your bottom line? Well, you got to make sure, if you're going to get less cases, you got to make sure that you're maximizing the value of every single case that you get to have, right? There's tort reform, and I think, Georgia went through tort reform.
Just experienced it.
But yeah, there's tort reform, non-attorney ownership, all of this stuff, fee caps. So tort reform and fee caps, for example, there are companies out there, and I just will leave them unnamed, but they're basically pushing for fee caps of like 20% in like California, Nevada, et cetera. And the framing, unfortunately, and this is my hot take, but the framing to the consumer is like, hey, we want to cap these fees at 20% because we want to stop these greedy lawyers from being able to take so much from you, from your case, from your pain and suffering, right? They're profiting off of you. But in reality, what's happening is they know that there's all these inefficiencies within these law firms, and they know that what those profit margins actually look like. And so by capping things at 20%, they're hoping that it will make things less profitable for any lawyer to take on certain types of cases. So like rideshare cases and all that stuff. So there's like a big kind of movement going on there. And so if it's less profitable to take on those cases, in turn, what's really sad is that it's actually the downstream impact to the consumer is that they have less access to justice. Because if no lawyer is going to take any of these rideshare cases or anything like that, because it's harder to profit off them, who are those people going to go to? And so to combat things like that, it's like, well, if that's going to happen, and again, I assume that the sky is falling every single day. That's how I operate, me and my team. And so I assume that if we're going to live in a world with fees being capped at 20%, how are we going to have to operate? And so that's where being faster and better, like more efficient than ever before, absolutely matters.
What are you seeing as just the sentiment, and how is that evolving towards AI, right? Amongst law firms? Because a few years ago, you mentioned AI, everybody's spooked, they want to have nothing to do with it. What are you seeing today? Is it just, are firms embracing it? Are firms skeptical? And if they are skeptical, like, what are they skeptical about?
Yeah, it's been interesting to be part of that education process and that evolution. But yes, like 4.5 years ago, I remember talking to, like, doing my first cold calls to lawyers. They're like, AI, tell me, how is AI going to help me run my law firm? And then now today, you talk to those very same lawyers and they're like, AI is going to run my entire law firm. And it's like, it's pretty crazy how much has changed over the past 4.5 years. So definitely people were spooked in the beginning. I do see a lot more adoption today. However, I do see people are still not realizing how fast things are moving. So I think there's a lot of people like doubting AI because they get spooked by some of the stuff that you see in the news where it's like, I don't know, AI hallucinates and lawyer gets disbarred or something like that. Yes, there are, issues with AI, and you should definitely check your work. But the rate of which AI is evolving, it's crazy. And it's only getting better and better and better. And it's only showcasing that it can basically take on more and more tasks over time. I mean, OpenAI just recently announced the ChatGPT agents and stuff. That stuff's really powerful. That's starting to do a lot of things that your exec assistant would typically do, right? It's pretty crazy. So I do think that folks should definitely be experimenting with AI more right now, because there's a point in time where you could very quickly end up being like the grandma, not knowing how to open up an email and something, and that's a reality, and you could be still incredibly young and be that grandma or grandpa.
Let's talk about actually EvenUp's AI model. One of the things that I would argue is one of the best ways to sink a whole lot of money into something right now is to build your own AI model. But you guys have done that, and it's something that's very unique. I've seen on the website, you kind of compare it to using GPT-4 and why it is more accurate, but also keeping a human in the loop.
Yes. So we got a lot of flack actually in the initial days for being having humans in the loop, right? And now everybody's talking about using humans in the loop because it's the right thing to do. The reason why that's important, and PIA specifically, how PIA was born is before ChatGPT even existed or OpenAI released it, we thought we had to create our own models, and we had to create this transformational technology ourselves if it weren't going to be invented elsewhere, right? So we were already building a model, a PI brain, if you will, that understood all of the context, the specialized kind of work and context that you would need to perform all of these tasks within personal injury, right? And then when ChatGPT kind of hit, most thought that we would be dead tomorrow, because they're oh yeah, now you can have ChatGPT draft a demand or whatever. And it was that couldn't be further from the truth, because ChatGPT or any of these other LLMs, they learn off of what exists on the internet. And what doesn't exist on the internet is a massive repository of medical bills, records, police reports, all of this stuff that it can just consume and create all these associations with. And so if you think about the model being the brain, and then the data going into it, the training data going into it being the experiences, things that ChatGPT does not learn online is this medical provider. So Springfield Medical Center X, and then anesthesiologist Y are one and the same provider. You only know this association by having actually done the work in that jurisdiction and been the paralegal or the case manager or attorney on the job, right? Seeing that they're connected. And so PIA has been trained with that context because we did the work. We had people humans in the loop doing the work. And so that's the kind of context that we feed into the brain. And then the output, the result, is what matters most. So if you actually ask, for any given task ChatGPT, find all of the total amounts in these different medical providers, given that it has not seen every single medical provider bills and records and stuff like that across the board, it's only able to extract the amount correctly around 70 to 80% of the time. Versus PIA paired with those models, it's able to extract that at around 97% accurate at the time, or at any given time. And so that's the huge difference. I would take that 97% any day, and that additional 3% that we're trying to kind of close the gap on is just only going to get closed by us seeing more and more documents than anybody else, and then training those models over time. Because today we see around 4,000 cases a week, more than any personal injury law firm in the country. And so it's pretty wild how much data we are amassing.
And I'm glad you said PIA, because I read it as PI AI, which is very clever of you guys. Where do you see this evolving? I mean, just in general with AI, let's say over the next 3 to 5 years, how do you see that in terms of AI enablement at law firms, the impact it's going to have, maybe even EvenUp's products?
EvenUp, the way that our products are evolving is it's taking on more and more work to basically cover all those gaps, those inefficiencies I was talking about. And so, I mean, there are a lot of developments that people can see today in terms of agentic AI. So AI agents, you can see people actually experimenting with like AI agents for different tasks like intake, and something that actually we released was AI agents for medical management or care management. So you can actually have like AI talking to clients. And of course, this is all, you have to set expectations with your clients. Like clients, obviously, keep in mind, in the world of personal injury, we are dealing with people who are going through the darkest moments of their life, right? And so just sending an AI bot at them and being like, talk to this person instead of a human, that could be, that could be bad. But if you set expectations correctly in terms of being like, hey, this AI agent is going to call you on a weekly basis and it's going to ask you how you feel. When you are talking to this AI agent, I want you to be as vulnerable as possible. There's no credit to being a tough guy or a tough gal, because being a tough guy or a tough gal only hurts your case. So be as vulnerable as possible. Share what are those little moments or those little things that you cannot do from the moment you wake up all the way to when you go to sleep. And this AI agent will capture all of that information, and we're going to use that information to advocate on your behalf. We're going to tell your story. So if you can make sure that the proper framing and expectations are set there, we are seeing folks are interacting with the AI agents as if they're real people. And that's the cool part. I've listened into these calls. I've interviewed some of the plaintiffs talking to the AI agents, and they're like, yeah, I forgot it was a AI bot. But what's cool is that these AI agents can basically mitigate some of those things. Like I was talking about the treatment gaps. Our AI agents now interact with the client, and it's like, hey, are you still going to go to your appointment on Friday with Dr. Smith? And if the client's like, no, actually, I got to go, I don't know, pick up my cat, or LA traffic is bad and it's across town, like I can't make that appointment. What the AI agent is able to do and work in tandem with the case manager is say, hey, okay, well, going to your treatment is important. If I were to able to find you a provider that's closer to your home or your office, would that be helpful? I can work with the case manager to send you some options over text. And then if the client says yes, awesome. Or if the client says no, I mean, this is still a transcript that's going to be flagged for your case manager or paralegal or attorney to step in and be like, oh, we need to get involved here and make sure that the client goes to treatments or gets their injections or anything like that on time. Because what's the harm if they don't? The carriers, the adjuster is going to say, you're not hurting because it seems like you've missed so much treatment, right? So that was a long explanation of where I think things are going, but I do think that there's going to be more workflows that we are automating or basically creating AI to power within, all of the personal injury law firms from intake to resolution. And so that's just one example. But I think firms like definitely need to be kind of looking at the evolution of how AI can streamline those processes, and then also think about, okay, well, now how do I upskill my talent, my organization to understand how to use these tools and build these systems and potentially even reimagine, how a law firm can actually operate today.
Yeah. I know you've used the word like efficiency a bunch, and this is an area that I'm also very passionate about. If you could dig in why this is so important, because just for somebody listening who may not grasp the concept and they might say, hey, that sounds great. Maybe I can increase revenue per employee and we can reduce things like time on desk. But the reality of it is that when it all comes down to it, you've got your cost of acquisition, the cost to acquire a case, and then you have what it costs you to actually move that case to completion and collect on that case. And the more profit you're able to have there, the more you're able to reinvest back into the firm, into acquiring cases. And if other law firms are doing this and you are not, and let's say you have two law firms that are each $10 million in annual revenue, and one is, has a profit of $3 or $4 million, another has a profit of $500,000, right? And they generate the same amount of revenue. One cannot really compete against the other.
Correct.
And if you scale this on top of fee caps and on top of private equity coming in and just you run this over several years, you'll see that if you don't adopt this in some way in terms of leveraging AI in your practice or at least improving efficiencies, you just won't be able to compete.
Absolutely. Again, I love always thinking about or imagining that the sky is falling every single day. You should imagine that future is tomorrow. You should imagine that fee caps, everything, 20%. How will I have to operate to be able to do what I do and, live the life that I want to live and all of that? What's interesting is when I think about efficiency, maybe a good example of like why efficiency matters is one of the stats that we have is, so across 2,000 law firms now, like we work with across the country. This is not any particular law firm. This is data extracted from looking at all 2,000 of these. It takes on average 150 days to send a demand after the last date of treatment. After the client is done treating and we can settle this case, it's taking on average 150 days for that demand to even go out. Why? There's a lot of reasons, because there's like missing bills and records and stuff that probably could have been identified and gathered sooner, all of that stuff. But I won't get into those root causes necessarily. But I was having a conversation with one of our firms, and I was trying to point out that actually, in fact, they were pretty close to the 150. They were like at 130 days. And I was pointing out how this needed to be improved because I was just like, this is an area of opportunity. And one of our firms was just like, no, Ray, I don't have time for this. I've got cash flow issues right now. So I gotta focus, pitch me another day, sell me whatever product you want another day. And I was like, no. This is your cash flow issue. Let me do the math for you. And this firm does, about 15, 20,000 cases a year. And I was like, if you were to decrease this, and we did the math together, me and my co-founder on the call with them, we did the math, and we're like, if you were to reduce this by just 30 days, reduce this time to send the demand by 30 days, that would mean $7 million back into your pocket based off of like some of the average settlements, the metrics and stuff that they shared with us. I'm like, $7 million back into your firm's pocket. That seems like it would be really helpful in terms of this cash flow issue, right? Now, imagine if we brought you down to what the top 10% of firms are doing on our platform. So the top 10% of firms are sending a demand around 48 days or so, 50 days after the last date of treatment. I'm like, if we brought that down to those levels, you could be putting $20 million back into the firm, right? That's your cash flow issue. And that's where we had his attention. And he was like, okay, so how do we solve this? But that's like, people aren't looking into those metrics, right? Like and I think largely it's because practice management systems and stuff, like it's very much like garbage in, garbage out. So not a lot of firms have quality data to look at because they're reliant on humans entering the data properly into the practice management systems so they can export the report that will tell them what's going on and get them the insights that they need to make decisions. But everyone's like fudging numbers across the board and stuff because everyone's so spread thin in terms of doing all the things to make the law firm operate and make the client happy that, yeah, there's a data hygiene issue. And fun fact, AI is really good at reading documents. Like EvenUp, for example, like our AI is really good at reading documents and extracting that. And so there is this world where data entry, we're already seeing it today. It's like we're taking data entry off of your team's plate and basically helping you not necessarily need to like enter that data, get the reports, and then make the decisions, but the AI is able to read the reports, the AI is able to read the documents and unearth the insights and literally tell you it's like what needs to happen ASAP based off of historical data, how it's seen you kind of manage these cases in the past. And it can give you proactive insights rather than reactive insights, which is, I think how law firms operate today.
Love it, man. I want to zoom out a little bit because it seems like in the last 5 years, I mean, you guys founded EvenUp 2019 and have scaled at a lightning fast pace, right? So, I mean, over $1 billion valuation already. Headcount is over 500 people at this point?
Yeah, like around 600.
What's that been like? Just across, what 5 years, 6 years almost?
Yeah. So EvenUp definitely scaled really, really fast. We're, fastest growing legal tech company in history. It's been insane. Like one of the fastest growing tech companies in history. And like, we're proud to have that status. We never sought that. Like we've always just been focused on delivering immense value to our customers. But that said, in terms of like scaling this company to that level, I mean, we started in the pandemic, right? Like, so when the company, like when me and my co-founders kind of launched this 2020, and I remember running around San Francisco with my co-founder, before COVID hit, before the pandemic hit. So we're running around. We got together $100,000 from a couple investors, friends and family, people that knew us and would bet on us this was just on idea, right? And in March, when the pandemic hit, I remember my heart sinking and I was just like, oh my gosh, how are we going to build this business in this environment? And you've probably heard like lots of stories. I think like Leonardo DiCaprio has a similar story. It was like, it's kind of like when your back's against the wall and you have no other option. There is no like plan B. You just got to make plan A work. That's kind of what we did here. And so built the business during the pandemic, so completely remote from the get-go. And I know a lot of lawyers are thinking like, they're like, how can I run all of this like remotely? Is it possible? And like, in a way, we're a great example of like, yes, it's possible to run a company in a remote fashion, but it comes with its own pains. And like, there's nothing that beats that connection and that speed of decision-making that you get from working in person. And so to fill that gap, like we had to create so much more kind of different like systems and processes and refine the way that we communicate with each other in a remote fashion to make sure that we can operate as quickly as someone who would be operating all in office. Today, I'll just be completely honest. We have now moved into more hybrid or moved more into in office, right?
Yeah.
So
you guys just have the new headquarters.
Correct. So 2 weeks ago, was the grand opening of our San Francisco headquarters. And it's just, I mean, I don't know if
you're preaching to the choir, man.
If our engineers are watching this, it was just so cool because when I went there and I was just sitting at a desk, I don't have a desk there, or I guess like I'm sure I could claim a desk, but I just don't. I kind of sit in the open. And it was so cool seeing like our product team, our engineering team, like everyone just kind of came up and they just like, they would ask me questions. And I learned so many things where I was just like, it was so astounding to me to realize, I was just like, wow, some things that I take for granted that I think is obvious. I'm like, how do you not know that? And I could take the time to actually like teach them a little bit more in terms of how certain things work. And the look on their faces when they're just like, that is so cool. And they felt so much more inspired in terms of what they were doing and what they were building. I was like, yeah, it's like a pretty game-changing thing. There's just so much value of just being together in terms of that, like learning by osmosis, right? And so we're definitely shifting more towards having more folks in office. Like I'm in the San Francisco office maybe every 2 weeks. I'm going to definitely make that a goal for myself. If I'm not with our customers, I'm with my team. So it's customers first, team second, me last. I don't know. People might think that's like a toxic way of operating, but that's how I operate today.
Yeah. What's a typical like day in the life for you right now?
Honestly, flights. I'm a weird person, so with that like whole hierarchy, with customer first, team second, me last. Me last means that I will even schedule flights in a way where it will not affect any time with the customer and my team. So 9 to 5, I don't have flights there. I will take either the early morning kind of flights or like the late at night red eye flights. So I think when I came to Atlanta, I like flew in at like 2 a.m., right? But that's because I want to spend as much time with the customer. I do believe that we've only been able to operate at the rate or like grow at the rate of which we do by being like glued to the customer, like joint hip to hip. And then of course, working with the team is secondary to that. It's like, okay, now we have all these insights. How can we get these insights to the team as fast as possible and build what we need to build and solve those problems? So lots of flights, I'll be honest. I can tell you which airports are like the absolute worst.
Which is the worst?
I mean, this is unfortunately, we're in Atlanta, and Atlanta airport is like the one airport that you should not be late to. Like that's like, unless you have like TSA pre-check and clear and all that stuff, even with clear, you're not safe. So I would say never be late for a flight at Atlanta airport because it's a behemoth. I've missed some flights here. So
yeah. You guys should lobby for like the EvenUp plane.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
At this point, you got to get the jet.
Yeah, the EvenUp private jet.
Exactly.
Honestly,
then you'll never miss a flight.
Yeah. but I'm too scared of those things. I'll fly commercial, and I'm still the guy who books economy. But since I fly so much, I get upgraded and stuff, like 90% likely to get upgraded. So there's that benefit. But yeah, me and my co-founders are incredibly frugal.
Good for you guys. Good for you guys. So Ray, as we come to a close, this being the Game Changing Attorney podcast, what does being a game changer mean to you?
Being a game changer is, first of all, like, I think if you see a unique insight in the world and you have full conviction that you can kind of see what's happening or what is to come, you believe in that. Being a game changer is having that inner confidence to pursue it no matter what anybody else thinks. And that's very much inspired by watching my parents navigate through life, and they have crazy stories themselves. But like also even looking back on our journey, where very early on people told us this 4.5 years ago. They said that this was the dumbest idea that they've ever heard of, and this would not work. And there was no money in personal injury.
That's how you know it's a good idea.
Yeah, and then now 4.5 years later, we are the example. Those very same people are blogging about us.
They're saying we always knew.
Yeah, we always knew it. They changed the story. It's like, yeah, we saw these folks coming up. And so if anything, you always want to learn from people who have done what you want to do. And so I very much believe in that, but I very much want to be someone that can one day impart a lot of advice to folks in terms of like having listened to my own kind of like intuition, or kind of saw what I saw and like believed in myself enough to bring that vision to a reality.
I want to give a huge thank you to Ray for taking the time to join us on the Game Changing Attorney podcast. If you found this episode valuable, here are 3 free ways that I can help you grow your law firm. Number 1, download the first chapter of my book absolutely free at GameChangingAttorney.com. Number 2, you can shoot me a text at 404-531-7691, and I'll answer any question that you've got for me. And finally, number 3, if you can leave this podcast a 5-star review, it'll help us gain access to more influential thought leaders and bring their lessons learned here to you. For more information on our interview with Ray Mieszaniec, see the show notes for this episode in your podcast app or visit legalpodcast.com.